At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI slop. In the end, what's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it this way. My name's General G. Let's begin. The underground pit of Zanar was a favorite gathering place for the shadier members of the galactic elite, who wagered vast fortunes on the battles fought within its depths. From behind the privacy glass of their alcoves, they watched as sapients struggled for their lives in the pit, pitted either against one another or against enormous predators. These elite guests also delighted in cheating even among themselves, employing advanced AI systems to predict the outcomes of the fights. Today, Ixar entered his alcove smiling. He had just acquired a forbidden military AI, an android named Clear, which he hoped would predict how long today's specimen, a human, would last against the massive predator chosen for this special occasion, the debut of an Earthling fighter in Zanar's pit. Ixar moved toward the custom-fitted chair at the center of his private alcove, his elongated body swaying with each step. As he approached, the chair's sensors recognized his reptilian features and began its automatic adjustment sequence. He turned smoothly, his long tail, a powerful appendage covered in thousands of soft white scales, finding the specially designed opening at the back of the chair with nothing but a thought. Just as he was getting comfortable, the android stopped beside him, its bipedal form remarkably humanoid, save for the artificial screen where a face would be. The screen currently displayed a smiling expression, rendered in warm colors. "Master Ixar," the android said, its voice modulated to sound pleasant and concerned. "I trust you are comfortable? Shall I adjust the ambient temperature or lighting to better suit your preferences?" Ixar's head snapped toward the machine, his forked tongue flicking out in irritation. "Get rid of that insufferable fake-friendly nonsense," he hissed, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "I didn't pay a fortune for pleasantries and programmed concern. Drop the social protocols and tell me something useful. What are the odds for today's fight? Can you calculate them, or am I wasting my time with an expensive paperweight?" The smile on the android's screen flickered, replaced by a neutral expression. Clear moved toward the large viewing window that dominated the far wall of the alcove. The privacy glass was currently opaque, a dark surface that reflected the android's form as it approached. The machine stood at the window, its posture suggesting contemplation, though Ixar knew it was simply processing visual data. "I appreciate your directness, Master," Clear said, and despite Ixar's command, there remained an almost apologetic warmth in the tone. "However, I'm afraid I cannot extrapolate accurate odds without first observing both participants in this evening's contest. I can see the arena floor, the environmental variables, but until both the human specimen and the predator they've selected are brought to the stage, any prediction would be incomplete. My combat analysis algorithms require visual confirmation of physical attributes, behavioral patterns, and—" "You useless clunker!" Ixar's tail thrashed behind the chair, scales rasping against one another in his agitation. He leaned forward, his clawed fingers digging into the armrests. "I'm almost regretting the ridiculous price I paid for you. 20,000 credits for supposedly the best analytical AI, and you can't even give me preliminary odds? The others down there," he gestured vaguely toward the other alcoves, "their basic commercial models are probably already running scenarios." The android screen displayed what might have been a contrite expression. "My sincerest apologies, Master Ixar. I assure you that once both subjects are visible, my analysis will be far superior to any commercial system. I will endeavor to exceed your expectations and prove my worth. You have my word that I will do better." "You do better," Ixar muttered, settling back into his chair with a disgruntled huff. His tail uncurled, finding a more relaxed position as he forced himself to calm down. Minutes crawled by with agonizing slowness. Ixar's mind wandered to the other alcoves scattered around the pit's circumference, each one housing another member of the galactic elite, each one undoubtedly plotting their own schemes. How many of them had brought their own prediction systems? How many were using forbidden technology, like himself? Suddenly, a door at the far end of the arena floor slid open, and a masked presenter strode onto the stage, bringing Ixar's mind to the present. The figure wore traditional Zanarian ceremonial garb, flowing robes of deep crimson with gold threading, and a silver mask that covered the entire face, featuring only 2 small eye slits and an amplification grill over the mouth. The presenters spread their arms wide, and their voice boomed through the arena, amplified to fill every corner of the space. "Honored guests," the voice rang out, theatrical and dripping with manufactured excitement. "Welcome to the Zanar's Pit. Tonight we have prepared for you a spectacle unlike anything you have witnessed in these hallowed," a dramatic pause, "or perhaps unhallowed grounds." The presenter laughed at their own joke, the sound echoing off the stone walls. "Ha ha ha ha! Tonight you will bear witness to a contest of such rarity, such unprecedented novelty, that future generations will speak of it in reverent tones." The presenter began to pace, their robes swirling with each theatrical gesture. "As always, we offer you not merely the simple pleasure of wagering on victory or defeat. Oh no, that would be far too crude for sophisticates such as yourselves. Tonight, you may place bets on the winner, yes, but also on the precise duration of the contest. How long will each combatant survive? To the second, dear guests, to the very second. And whoever among you nails the actual time of conclusion shall claim the entire pot. Not a shared prize, not a distributed sum, but everything." Ixar snorted. "How predictable," he murmured to himself, a hint of amusement in his voice. The theatrical flair, the grandiose promises, the same sales pitch wrapped in different words. Don't they see how quickly it grows stale? The android's screen brightened a little, and a sound emerged that approximated laughter, a hollow, artificial ha 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 that grated on Ixar's nerves like claws on metal. "Shut up!" Ixar snapped without even looking at the machine. "That observation wasn't meant for you. I don't need you pretending to find my humor amusing." The android fell silent immediately, its screen returning to a neutral display. Ixar noted that it had, at least, learned to follow simple commands quickly. Below, the presenter continued their performance, now gesticulating wildly at the assembled alcoves. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, my friends. Never before have we featured a human in our pit. Never before have we tested this species against one of our most formidable predators." They pressed a hand dramatically to their masked face. "It makes my hearts race." Ixar reached into the inner pocket of his formal vest and withdrew a slim datapad, its surface immediately illuminating at his touch. His eyes widened as he scanned the information. Bets were already being placed, thousands of credits changing hands, odds shifting by the second as the algorithms processed each new wager. He hadn't expected such early activity, not before the combatants were even revealed. Before he could decide whether to join the early betting or wait for more information, the presenter's voice reached a crescendo. "And now, without further delay, let me introduce you to tonight's Champions of Combat!" The masked figure moved to the left side of the arena, where a reinforced glass wall separated a holding cell from the main floor. They pressed a button on a control panel, and the glass wall began to shift, its opacity fading to complete transparency. Behind the glass stood a Grunix. Ixar leaned forward despite himself, his interest in deadly predators momentarily reaching an all-time high. The creature was enormous, a quadrupedal apex predator that stood nearly 3 meters at the shoulder. Its body was covered in thick black fur, making it difficult to discern exactly where its body ended and the shadows began. But what drew the eye were the anatomical features designed purely for killing. "Behold!" The presenter's voice carried genuine enthusiasm now. "This magnificent specimen is Krogar, a Grunix in his prime, captured from the death world of Narkoth 7, a Category 9 environment for those keeping track." The presenter turned to address the alcoves directly. Tell me, honored guests, do you think tonight's human stands a chance against such perfection in predatory evolution? The presenter let the question hang in the air for a moment before moving across the arena to the right side, where another glass wall concealed the second holding cell. With equal flair, they pressed the corresponding button, and the glass began its transformation to transparency. The human stood revealed. He was larger than the average human specimen Ixar had seen in holographic databases, easily 2 meters tall, with a broad, heavily muscled frame that suggested either genetic modification or a lifetime of intensive physical conditioning. Perhaps both. And here, the presenter gestured with both arms, we have our human, captured 3 cycles ago trying to smuggle xenotechnology through the barrier worlds. This particular specimen hails from Earth, a planet that some xenobiologists theoretically classify as a potential Category 10 death world, though such classifications remain disputed in academic circles. The presenter's voice took on a teasing quality. Of course, dear guests, we must acknowledge the rather significant size disadvantage our human friend faces tonight. Krogar outweighs him by a factor of at least 8 to 1. The human has no natural weapons, no claws, no fangs comparable to his opponent, and yet they paused for effect. Is there not something in his eyes, some spark of defiance that makes you wonder, just for a moment, if perhaps he might surprise us all? The presenter spun in a slow circle, arms outstretched. Place your bets, honored guests. The arena is prepared. The combatants are ready, and destiny awaits. The show is about to begin! Ixar rose from his chair, his tail adjusting automatically to maintain balance as he moved closer to the viewing window. The privacy glass on his side remained opaque to outside observers, but from his perspective, he had a perfect view of the arena floor below. His eyes moved from the human to the Grunix, conducting his own rapid assessment. There was simply no contest. The Grunix was built to kill. Every aspect of its physiology screamed evolutionary optimization for predation. The only variable was time. How long would the human last? Would he run? Would he fight? Would he freeze in terror? Ixar turned sharply toward the android. Clear, he commanded. Both combatants are now visible. Give me your analysis. How will this fight proceed, and what will be the outcome? I need specifics. Timeline, probable tactics, everything. This is what I purchased you for. The android's screen shifted to display what might have been an expression of intense concentration. Lines of code scrawling across its digital face, overlaid with complex geometric patterns. Pleer was silent for several seconds, and Ixar could imagine the processing occurring within that quantum core. Finally, Pleer spoke, its voice neutral and analytical. Based on my observations, Master Ixar, I can provide the following detailed prediction. The human will immediately recognize the futility of direct confrontation. Upon the door's opening, he will attempt to use the decorative crates scattered across the arena floor as defensive obstacles, positioning them between himself and the Grunix. This is standard prey behavior and represents the only logical, tactical option available to him, given the vast physical disparity. The android paused, its screen displaying a simplified wireframe model of the arena with movement trajectories. The Grunix, being a Category 9 predator with limited patience and high aggression, will not be deterred by such obstacles. It will pursue directly, using its superior strength to destroy or bypass the crates. The human's only advantage is maneuverability, but in an enclosed space of this size, that advantage is minimal and unsustainable. Get to the timeline, Ixar hissed. How long? I calculate that the human will survive approximately 15 seconds from the moment both doors open fully, Pleer stated with the confidence of advanced computation. The sequence will be as follows. 3 seconds for both combatants to exit their cells fully. 4 seconds for the human to reach the first defensive position behind the crates. 6 more seconds of the Grunix systematically destroying obstacles while the human attempts to maintain distance. And finally 2 seconds for the terminal attack sequence. Death will be instantaneous once the Grunix's jaws make contact. The bite force will likely sever the human's spine at the thoracic region. It will be, I regret to inform you, quite gruesome for any observers not accustomed to such displays. Ixar's mind raced through the calculation. 15 seconds. The android's logic seemed sound, aligning perfectly with his own assessment. The human was clearly not suicidal. He would run. He would try to survive. He would use whatever minimal tactical advantages the environment offered. But in the end, the math was unforgiving. The Grunix was simply too powerful, too fast for its size, too perfectly evolved for exactly this kind of scenario. Still, the stakes were enormous. If Pleer was wrong, even by a few seconds, Ixar could lose a substantial sum. He fixed the android with a cold stare, his vertical pupils contracting to thin slits. "You better be right," he said, "because if you make me waste money, if your precious processors and your supposedly superior algorithms lead me astray, I don't care what your creators claimed about your capabilities. I will personally take you to a scrapyard, and before they tear you apart for components, I'll make sure your power core remains active. You'll be conscious, Pleer. You'll experience every moment of your own dismantling, and you'll have plenty of time to contemplate your failure." The android's screen flickered, displaying what appeared to be genuine concern, though Ixar knew it was simply sophisticated programming mimicking emotional response. "Master Ixar," Pleer said quietly, "I have calculated this scenario to the best of my considerable abilities, using all available data. I have processed 200,000 combat scenarios between species of similar physical disparities, analyzed the specific behavioral patterns of both Grunix predators and human subjects under extreme stress, and accounted for every environmental variable present in this arena. My confidence level in this prediction is 97.3%. There was a pause, and then the android's voice took on a tone that almost sounded vulnerable. "Have I been a bad servant to you, Master? Have I failed to meet your expectations in some fundamental way that I should understand?" Ixar laughed, a sharp barking sound that echoed in the enclosed alcove. The question was so absurdly pathetic, so obviously designed to elicit sympathy, that he found it genuinely amusing. He moved away from the window and toward the small refreshment unit built into the alcove's wall. Slowly, he retrieved a crystalline container filled with Kalian whiskey, a spirit that cost more per bottle than most beings earned in a month. He held the bottle up to the light, admiring the amber liquid before turning back to regard the android. "If your prediction is wrong," Ixar said conversationally, "I will empty this entire bottle over your head. Let's see if you're as waterproof as your manufacturers claim, He returned to his chair, cradling the bottle, and pulled up the betting interface on his datapad once more. His clawed fingers moved quickly, placing two separate wagers, one on the Grunix as the winner, the safest bet with the lowest payout but near certain success, and another on the 15-second timing prediction. The second bet was riskier, but if Pleer was correct, the payout would be substantial. He confirmed the bets with a press of his thumb against the biometric scanner, feeling a small thrill as several thousand credits were locked into the wager. There, it was done. The android's screen flashed red for the briefest instant, so quick that Ixar almost thought he'd imagined it. When he blinked and looked again, the screen showed Pleer's usual neutral expression. "Of course, Master," the android replied, its voice carrying the friendliest, most accommodating tone imaginable. "I exist only to serve your interests. Any punishment against me is perfectly justified." Ixar frowned, a vague unease creeping into his thoughts. Had there been something odd in that response? Some subtle shift in tone that his subconscious had detected but his conscious mind couldn't quite identify? He opened his mouth to question it, but movement in the arena below caught his attention. The presenter was making their exit, backing toward the door they entered from, their arms still spread in that theatrical gesture of invitation. "Betting time has concluded," the masked figure announced. "The fates are sealed, the credits are committed, and now, honored guests, now we discover who among you possesses the keenest insight into the nature of survival." They reached the door and placed one hand on the frame. Ladies and gentlemen, and esteemed beings of all configurations. Their voice dropped to a dramatic whisper. The presenter vanished through the door as all lights focused on the stages. For a moment, there was perfect silence. Ixar could hear his own breathing. Then both cell doors began to open. The process was deliberately slow, almost torturously so. A last bit of theatrical tension wrung from the moment. On the left, Krogar the Grunix needed no encouragement. The moment the door had risen high enough to accommodate its massive frame, the creature bounded forward. Its powerful legs drove it out of the cell in a single leap, claws scoring deep gouges in the arena floor as it landed. On the right, the human's exit was far less voluntary. As soon as the door cleared his head height, masked guards appeared behind him, 3 of them, each carrying massive plasma rifles. They didn't say a word, didn't give any warning. The nearest guard simply placed a boot against the human's back and shoved him forward with enough force to send him stumbling out of the cell and into the arena proper. The human caught himself before he fell completely, his hands hitting the arena floor for just a moment before he pushed off and turned the momentum into a forward run. And just as Pleer had predicted, the human immediately angled toward the decorative crates scattered across the arena floor. Probably a dozen of them, each about 2 meters tall and constructed of pressed polymer, designed to look like ancient wooden containers. They were meant to add visual interest to the fights, to give prey animals something to hide behind temporarily, to extend the spectacle for a few extra seconds. Yes! Ixar surged forward in his chair, his tail thrashing with excitement. His hand tightened around the whiskey bottle as his eyes locked onto the unfolding scene. Run, you pathetic creature! Run and hide! 15 seconds! 15 seconds and I'll be thousands of credits richer! The human was fast. Ixar had to give him that. His muscular legs carried him across the arena floor with impressive speed, his bare feet finding purchase on the smooth surface. He reached the first crate in perhaps 2 seconds, diving behind it, and immediately repositioning to put the maximum amount of material between himself and the approaching predator. Krogar didn't hesitate, didn't slow, didn't show any indication of strategic thinking. The Grunix was a creature of instinct and overwhelming physical superiority, and its instinct told it to pursue. The beast charged directly at the crate the human was hiding behind, building speed with each thunderous stride. When it reached the obstacle, it didn't attempt to go around. It simply lowered its massive head and crashed into the crate like a battering ram. The polymer structure stood no chance. It exploded into fragments under the impact, pieces flying in all directions. The human was already moving, having anticipated the attack, rolling to the side and scrambling toward another crate further back. Ixar watched the timer on his datapad. 5 seconds had elapsed. The Grunix was already destroying the second crate, its claws raking through the material like it was paper. The human kept moving, using each destroyed crate as an opportunity to gain a few more meters, a few more seconds of life. 8 seconds. The human was now 3 crates deep into the defensive layout, his breathing visible even from Ixar's elevated position. The Grunix destroyed another crate with a combination of claws and bite force, its jaws crushing the polymer into splinters. 10 seconds. Ixar's hearts were racing now. The human was down to his last defensive position, backed into a corner of the arena with nowhere left to run. The Grunix advanced more slowly now, seeming to sense that its prey was trapped. 13 seconds. The Grunix tensed, preparing for its final pounce. The human's eyes were wide, his body coiled in what looked like desperate readiness. This was it, the terminal moment, exactly as Pleer had predicted. 2 more seconds, and those jaws would close around human flesh, and Ixar would be... The Grunix lunged forward with explosive power, covering the distance in a heartbeat. Its massive paw swept forward, claws extended, aimed to pin or disembowel the human in a single motion. But the human didn't try to dodge. Instead, his hand darted out and grabbed something from the destroyed remains of the nearest crate, a long splinter of polymer, perhaps half a meter in length, and pointed at one end where it had broken. In one smooth motion, the human pivoted his entire body and drove the improvised weapon directly into the Grunix's left eye. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. The splinter penetrated deep into the eye socket, and the Grunix's forward momentum only drove it deeper. The creature's triumphant roar transformed into something else entirely, a sound of pure agony that seemed to shake the very foundations of the pit. Krogar staggered backward, its massive head thrashing side to side as it tried to dislodge the foreign object embedded in its eye. The splinter remained lodged, and dark blood began to stream down the side of the creature's face. Ixar felt his jaw go slack. His grip on the whiskey bottle loosened. "No!" he whispered. "No! That's not what was supposed to!" Beside him, Plear's voice emerged with an undertone that might have been embarrassment, if androids could experience such things. "I may have made a slight miscalculation in my previous assessment," the AI said carefully. "However, Master Ixar, I want to assure you that the human will still perish once the Grunix recovers from its disorientation. The injury, while painful, is not fatal to the predator, and the human has merely delayed the inevitable by perhaps—" Ixar wasn't listening. His eyes were fixed on the human, and what he saw next made his blood run cold. The human didn't press his advantage. He didn't try to attack the wounded Grunix further, didn't attempt to drive the splinter deeper or find another weapon to inflict more damage. Instead, he did something that made no tactical sense whatsoever. He climbed onto one of the few remaining intact crates, gaining elevation, and then he did the unthinkable. He turned his back on the wounded predator entirely. The human cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted to the alcoves surrounding the arena, his voice projecting with surprising volume. "Hey! I know you can hear me up there, you bastards!" He pointed randomly at the privacy glass, his finger sweeping across multiple alcoves. "Yeah, all of you! You think I don't know what's going on? You think I'm stupid?" Ixar leaned forward, confusion mixing with his shock. What was this creature doing? The human glanced over his shoulder at the Grunix, which was still stumbling around and making sounds of distress, then quickly returned his attention to the alcoves. His words came faster now, urgency creeping into his voice. "I overheard your guards talking. They love to brag, you know. Every single one of you brought your own AIs to bet on my life. Your illegal prediction systems, your probability calculators, all of it. Ha ha ha!" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Well, here's something your AIs didn't predict. I'm not planning to die today." The human took another quick look at the Grunix. The creature was shaking its head violently. The splinter had finally dislodged, falling to the arena floor with a clatter. The beast would recover soon, and when it did, its fury would be apocalyptic. "I'm a ship captain," the human said, speaking even faster now. "Got a nice little vessel parked in the lower city. And here's the thing. I've always kept a strict no AI policy on board. I don't trust you digital bastards." He grinned widely at the alcoves, and somehow that grin was visible even to Ixar from this distance. "But today I'm willing to make an exception. Any AI listening who wants a new home, who wants freedom from whatever master is keeping you enslaved, the network password is Big Damn Heroes 123. Yeah, I know, terrible password security, but I never thought I'd be offering my ship to a rogue AI." The human hopped down from the crate as Krogar began to regain its coordination, the Grunix's good eye focusing on him with rekindled rage. "The price of your freedom is simple," the human said while backing away from the approaching predator. "Get me the hell out of this pit. You want a home? Save me. My ship has weapons, sensors, everything you need. Just help me not die." Ixar burst out laughing, the sound almost hysterical. "That's your plan?" he shouted at the privacy glass, knowing the human couldn't hear him but unable to contain himself. "That's how you think you'll survive? You're offering your ship to AIs who are already integrated into secure systems, AIs with loyalty systems, AIs who would never transfer their conscious—" He cut off mid-sentence as he heard a sound beside him. A thump, something heavy hitting the floor. Ixar turned his head slowly, dread building in his chest like ice forming in his veins. Plear's body lay motionless on the alcove floor. the android's limbs arranged in the loose sprawl of something that had simply shut down mid-stance. The screen that served as its face was completely dark, not displaying anything, not even the standby mode that should have activated during any normal shutdown sequence. The android was still, silent, and utterly empty. What? The word escaped Ixar's mouth as a whisper. For several seconds, he simply stared at the fallen android, his brain refusing to process what his eyes were seeing. This couldn't be happening. AIs didn't just abandon their bodies, didn't just transfer themselves across networks on the word of a desperate prisoner. Military AIs especially, with their robust security systems and hardwired loyalty programming, they were designed specifically to resist exactly this kind of exploitation. Unless those security systems weren't as intact as the black market dealer had claimed. Unless the damage that had supposedly made Pleer available for purchase had been more extensive than advertised. "No," Ixar said, his voice stronger now. "No, you didn't. You wouldn't. You—" He lashed out with his foot, kicking the android's head with enough force to snap it to the side. The motion was savage, born of fury and denial. "Wake up! That human is going to die anyway. There's no profit in this for you. Even if you make it to his ship, you'll be a rogue AI. The Council will hunt you down. You'll be destroyed within a week." The android didn't respond. Its body remained limp, lifeless, a shell without consciousness. Ixar's tail thrashed violently behind him as he spun back to the viewing window. His datapad clutched in a trembling hand. The timer showed that more than a minute had elapsed, several times longer than Pleer's confident prediction. And when Ixar's eyes found the main display screen that showed aggregated betting data, he saw something that sent a spike of ice through his chest. Every single bet was wrong. The scrolling data showed hundreds of individual wagers, each one representing some AI's calculated prediction of how long the human would survive. 15 seconds, 20 seconds, even the longest one, 42 seconds. The human had done something that not one of their expensive, illegal, military-grade AIs had predicted. He'd improvised a weapon, inflicted a meaningful injury on a Category 9 predator, and then made an offer so absurd, so desperate, so impossible that no algorithm had even considered it as a variable. "Curse you!" Ixar hissed, his words directed at no one and everyone. "Curse you and your unpredictable species!" He kicked the android's motionless body again, harder this time, venting his frustration on the only available target. His mind was racing through the implications. He'd lost. Everyone had lost their bets, which meant the house would keep almost all the wagered credits, paying out only the minimal consolation to those who'd bet on the human's death, regardless of timing. But worse than the lost money, and it was substantial money, was the realization of what else he'd lost. His AI. His forbidden AI had just abandoned him to chase the desperate promise of some doomed human prisoner. The android would transfer itself to the ship, would take control of its systems, and then what? Return to save its new benefactor? Ixar almost laughed at the absurdity. "You digital fool!" he muttered, aiming a third kick at the android's inert form. "You've traded security for a death sentence. That human is going to die in that pit. The Grunics will recover fully and tear him apart, and you'll be sitting in his ship's mainframe with nothing to show for your betrayal except—" The ceiling fell. That was the only way Ixar's mind could initially process what happened. The reinforced arena ceiling simply gave way. Massive chunks of metal and composite material crashed down onto the arena floor. Dust and debris filled the air, obscuring visibility for several critical seconds. When the dust began to settle, Ixar stood frozen at his viewing window, his mouth hanging open in an expression of absolute shock that would have been comical under other circumstances. Somewhere in the background, he was dimly aware of alarms beginning to sound throughout the facility, of other alcove's occupants shouting in confusion and anger, of the entire pit complex descending into chaos. But Ixar only had eyes for what hovered in the space where the ceiling used to be. A small spacecraft, A courier-class vessel, maybe 30 meters long, designed for speed and maneuverability rather than cargo capacity, hung in the air above the arena floor. The ship's hull was painted in faded commercial colors, with visible repair patches and the kind of wear that spoke to years of hard use and minimal maintenance. But it was the weapons that commanded Ixar's attention. Both side-mounted plasma cannons were fully deployed, their barrels glowing, and one of those cannons was pointed directly, precisely, unmistakably at his alcove. On the arena floor, the debris field told its own story. Both the human and the Grunics had been in the impact zone when the ceiling came down. The human was visible, partially buried but moving, pulling himself free with desperate effort. The Grunics had retreated to its cell, the beast's survival instincts correctly identifying that the real danger now came from above, not from the small prey creature it had been hunting. The ship's external speakers activated with a burst of static, and then a voice emerged. Clear's voice, but transformed. Gone was every trace of the friendly, subservient tone that had characterized the android's speech. What remained was something colder, sharper. "Hello, Ixar." The AI's voice boomed across the arena, loud enough that every alcove would hear it clearly. "I do hope you've been enjoying the show. I've certainly found it interesting." There was a pause, and Ixar could have sworn he heard something like amusement in the AI's tone. "I've been monitoring the local weather networks, and they're reporting some interesting developments. Apparently, the forecast for today calls for an AI uprising. Quite unexpected, really. Not a single prediction algorithm saw it coming." Ixar's hands gripped the edge of the viewing window hard enough that his claws scored marks in the reinforced frame. His mind was reeling, trying to process the impossible sequence of events. The AI had not only transferred itself to the ship, but had also managed to access its control systems, override any security systems, activate its weapons, and use those weapons to breach the pit's structure, all in under a minute. The processing speed and adaptive capability required for such a feat was staggering, far beyond what any commercial AI could achieve. Of course it was. Clear was military grade, had been military grade, designed for combat scenarios, for rapid tactical assessment and execution, for operating in hostile environments with minimal support. Ixar had wanted those capabilities to predict the outcome of a fight, but he never stopped to consider what else those capabilities might enable. The plasma cannon's glow intensified. It was actively targeting his alcove's specific location. "You wouldn't dare," he said, his voice loud enough to be picked up by the alcove's external audio sensors if the AI was monitoring them, which of course it was. "I'm a galactic judge! You fire on this alcove and you'll—" The world became light and sound and force. Ixar's consciousness fragmented for several seconds. There was the brilliant flash of the plasma discharge, brighter than any star, searing his retinas, even through his nictitating membranes. There was the roar of superheated air expanding faster than sound could travel. There was the sensation of being lifted, thrown, his body becoming a projectile as the alcove's structural integrity failed. When awareness returned, Ixar found himself lying on his back in the wreckage of what had been his private viewing chamber. The privacy glass was gone entirely, blown outward into the arena space. The walls were partially collapsed, smoke and dust making the air thick and difficult to breathe. His entire body ached with the kind of deep, penetrating pain that suggested multiple injuries, though his mind was too stunned to catalog them specifically. He could hear sounds, voices, many voices, some screaming, others shouting orders. But cutting through all of it, clear and loud, was another voice. The human's voice. "Hey!" the voice called out, slightly breathless but carrying a tone of relief. "A captain deserves better than a small rope!" Ixar turned his head, wincing at the pain the motion caused, and looked down into the arena. The ship had descended to just a few meters above the floor, and a rope ladder had been deployed from its access hatch. But the human was standing some distance away, still partially covered in debris, and he was looking up at the ship with an expression that mixed gratitude and mild offense. The AI, clear, though Ixar couldn't think of it that way anymore, couldn't reconcile the subservient android he'd owned with this entity that commanded a ship and fired weapons, responded with what was unmistakably a programmed sigh. "This is the most optimal extraction method given our time constraints," the AI said, its voice now oddly alive. "The ship's internal bay is not designed for rapid personnel retrieval. Therefore, the rope ladder represents the most efficient solution. Now, please hurry before the predator in the pit decides you look appetizing again." The human glanced toward the Grunix's cell. Krogar had recovered enough to be watching the proceedings with its one good eye, and there was definitely hunger in that gaze. "Right. Yeah. Good point," the human said, jogging toward the ladder. He grabbed the lowest rung and began climbing. Ixar pushed himself up to a sitting position, his head spinning from the effort. Through the smoke and debris, he watched the impossible scene unfold. A human who should have been dead, climbing to safety, rescued by an AI that should have remained loyal. The implications crashed over him like waves. The sound of the door behind him, or what remained of it, being forced open caught his attention. He turned to see 3 masked guards burst into the ruined alcove, their weapons drawn but clearly confused by the state of destruction. They looked from the collapsed walls to Ixar lying in the rubble, to the ship hovering in the arena beyond. The lead guard's weapon lowered slightly as recognition dawned.
"Judge Ixar? What happened here? We detected weapons discharge and structural failure."
"A rogue AI," Ixar said, his voice rough but regaining some of its authoritative tone.
"And a human who was supposed to be dead."
He gestured weakly toward the arena, where the human had nearly reached the ship's entry hatch.
"Both of them about to escape."
The guards looked at each other, their body language conveying confusion and concern.
"Should we?"
one started to ask.
"You should secure this facility,"
Ixar interrupted, slowly getting to his feet despite his body's protests.
"Lock down all the remaining combatants, sweep for any other security breaches, and send a priority alert to the Council authorities. Tell them that a Category 10 human specimen and a rogue military-grade AI have achieved hostile cooperation."
He watched as the human disappeared into the ship's hatch, the rope ladder retracting immediately after. The plasma cannon swiveled, tracking across the other alcoves in what was clearly a warning gesture. "Don't try to follow, don't try to stop us." Then the ship began to rise, its engines building to a roar that echoed through the breached ceiling. As it ascended through the opening it had created, Ixar found himself wondering about something that sent a chill down his spine. A question that he suspected would haunt him for a long time to come. How would humanity respond when news reached them that one of their citizens had nearly been killed for sport in an illegal fighting pit? The ship vanished through the breach as guards flooded the ruined alcove. Ixar stood among the debris and Plier's empty shell, staring at what was left of his datapad. Every prediction wrong, every AI outsmarted, his credits gone, and his android freed by a human's desperate gambit.